talk a little bit about generative AI. That's a good thing because we had two keynotes this morning discussing the subject already. And I propose and offer you to navigate together and explore the sometimes fuzzy water between commercial ownership and collaborative openness when we speak about LLMs, so large language models. All right, but first, let me introduce myself. I'm Raphaël Simete. I'm French. I'm coming from Paris. I also have some West African origin. I'm a certified yoga teacher, just to know, for you to know. I discovered internet and open source at university in 94. That's 30 years ago. I never stopped working around open source since. I work presently for Worldline. Just whoever heard about Worldline before today, just raise your hand. One, that's good. That's why I'm an architect, okay? I design complex solutions, but now I'm currently also head of DevRel, so it's good for Worldline to be more known by tech people or tech profiles. That's how I'm here today. And here are the few details if you want to contact, follow me, watch, read me, or whatever, right? As I said, I work for Worldline. Worldline is in a payment domain. We are more than 7,000 engineers all around Europe and the world. And we manage critical volumes with heavy regulated data like payment, but also in the health industry or transport. All right. As I said, I'm an architect. I have some open source expertise. I'm not, and that's a disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not even an AI scientist or AI specialist, all right? I like to build systems, and I need to understand what are the bricks and mortar that I can use to solve business solutions. And that's my point of view of generative AI, and that the journey I did, and I want to share with you today. So to do that, just a few insights about the last decades regarding generative AI. In the 10 years ago, we already had a language model, so dealing about semantics. So with word embeddings already and word-to-vec or GLOVE algorithm, but they were quite limited. So everything changed in 2017 with the publication of the Attention is All You Need paper by Google Research, introducing the transformer architecture. And this unlocked the capacities of those language and paved the way to large language models and all the hype we did observe a few years ago with generative AI, ChatGPT, and the adoption by individuals and the raise of responsibility concern about the power of such a technology and the impact it will have on the society. Jan described it very well a few minutes ago. And tomorrow, that movement will continue. We can already see pointing on the horizon small language model because the new frontier will also be devices, edge computing, mobile, and the rise also of agentic AI and large action model. But for now, let's concentrate on LLM. And I think that when I observe what is going on here with my background of open source specialist and aficionado, I see a pattern here. I mean, GenAI, the internet, open source, they all started in labs and universities at the moment where researchers are very used and keen to reuse the works of each other and to build on top of each other. So they publish papers, they share codes, they share ideas, and collectively we advance generative AI. Same thing with open source, with networking and the internet. Then it reached individuals, and with the hype with ChatGPT, use cases. The individual user now is expecting something similar to what ChatGPT gave as an experience, all right? And now it's starting also to be adopted by enterprises because nobody wants to miss the train. And they say we should inject those new components in our solution. You should build new business model on top of that. So there's a lot of money involved, a lot of value, maybe a little bit too much in the US, a little bit in China, and not enough in Europe, yes. But here we are at this stage. And if I observe the pattern, I predict that in a few years, those bricks, the LLMs themselves, will become commodities, things that will be used to integrate and to build on top of, right? So it's just like open source and the internet, but this time it's going much, much faster. So it's kind of difficult. You're not really ready to interpret and anticipate what's going on here. That's why I think it's interesting to compare it with the open source and maybe anticipate a few aspects. I'd like today to focus on the licenses aspect of such models, and maybe with a map navigate and understand the different positioning that we can have from the actors or communities regarding generative AI today. So I'm not an AI scientist, so what I did in my company, I do have AI scientists, data scientists, and I went and see them, because in Worldline we deal with transaction, EV volumes of transactions, and we do AI for a long time. I asked them, and two of them actually wrote this book. So they're quite knowledgeable about that. And I asked them, what should I focus on? What should I check if I want to evaluate how open a model is? What are the components, the artifacts that I should check? So they came with this schema. So here you can see the different steps or the different kind of models that you can have, like the foundational model, so a very generic model trained on a very large data set, like all Wikipedia, all the books, all the articles it can access to. Then you have the fine-tuned or derived or specialist version of this model, so a fine-tuned model built on top of that, but with extra data to specialize the model, so with human instruction and responses. And some of the model can even be reinforced by with human interaction, other inputs, and sometimes with an intermediate model called the reward model that is used to retrain and to specialize again the model, all right? Having this in mind, I asked them, what should I look at? So they said, obviously, the model. But we understand that the model, it's quite difficult to define what the model is. I asked them, is it the code? They told me, as an AI researcher, I don't really need the code. What I like to know is the architecture. As soon as I know the architecture in the research domain on AI, I'm very able to reproduce the code very easily. It's not a big deal, all right? So I have to know the architecture and maybe the weight. So the weight is the result of the training of the model, the configuration of the model, configured and trained on a data set. Speaking of data set, they said the data set is also something I'd like to have access to in order to be able to check what is in it, or maybe modify it, adapt it, all right? So whether it's the pre-training data set, so the large one, or the fine-tuned data set, the smaller one that is used to specialize the model or derive the new version of the model. Then there's also the reward model, not often visible, not often shared, that is also interesting to check how open and how reusable it is or not, right? And at the end, yes, they also speak about code, but they say the interesting part and the interesting code that I'd like to have is the data processing code. So all the heavy lifting, how to filter, prepare the data set, inject them in the model, do the training, etc., etc. Is this code available? Can I modify it? Can I reuse it to build my own version or even my own LLM? All right. Based on that, what I decided to do is to build a kind of matrix of a map to score those different artifacts and then to be able to evaluate how open a model is. So starting for the score of 0, it's closed, it's a black box. We don't know anything about the artifact, whether it's the data set, the model, the data processing code, etc., etc. And to 4 is it's completely open, so I can access the artifact, I can modify it, I can reuse it, and I can distribute it without any limitation in the usage of it. All right? So basically, it's more like an open source kind of definition. And in between, you have 1. You only have research papers that are published on the artifact, on the model, for instance. 2, restricted access. I can access the artifact, but under certain conditions. So I need a special agreement. So I have to pay somebody to do that, or I have to show that it's for a research purpose only, right? And then 3, it's open. I can access, reuse, modify it, but I have limitation on the usages. What I propose from now on is to use this matrix and try to evaluate or just have a broad vision of what's going on regarding this matrix with a large language model, we know now to just have an idea what the domain is. So let's start with market leading players. What I mean by that is big players with a lot of money, maybe based in the US, right? And let's start with OpenAI because they were the origin of all the hype with ChatGPT. So OpenAI, the name is interesting. It started as a non-profit organization in the US. The objective was to advance the research in AI for the sake of humankind, that kind of stuff. So for the first version of the GPT family of model, version 1 and 2, the model was open, completely open. I can access to it, to the code. I can modify it. I can derive, and I can distribute it. But no information about the data set and the code, only description, general description in research paper. Then with the hype, and starting with version 3 of GPT, and then 4, and then now version, they decided to close everything. And basically now they're pivoting and becoming a very for-profit organization, right? It's still called OpenAI, but now it's a commercial company with a lot of money involved. We spoke about Microsoft. A lot of different actors are playing in this arena, and it's a business, right? ChatGPT, which is a fine-tuned version of GPT adapted to interaction and chat with humans, is only described in the research paper. So it's interesting to see how they moved from something that was kind of open to completely closed. Another thing that is very important is it's not only the license, whether there is one or it's commercial and closed. You have some also terms of use. And when you read the terms of use of OpenAI and ChatGPT, there is this clause that is very important. They say you may not use output from our model to develop models that will compete with OpenAI. Right? So basically, you can't train competitors with data that is coming from OpenAI. And we'll see that's important for the rest, right? Another player is Google. As I said, they started the transformer architecture, the attention is all you need paper, and the BERT implementation, which was quite open also. So 4 in the model, totally open, the code also completely open under open source license. The data set, some restriction to access it, right? Then again, with the hype and with all these business opportunities rising with the ChatGPT era, let's say, they created their large language model, Palm 2 first and now Gemini, and they decided to close everything again. But they did describe a few things in a research paper, so the model and the data set. What they did recently is they adopted a more pragmatic approach, and they said, okay, we have this very commercial version of our LLM. Let's do an open or open source. It depends on how you see it, but let's authorize people to reuse and modify the model or a small version of the model that is called Gemma. All right, so Gemma is similar to Gemini. It's open, but with some limitation. We'll see which ones. We don't have any information except what is described in the research paper, and I guess it's kind of the same data set as Gemini was trained on, right? And the tool chain is available to specify and to specialize and fine-tune the model on top of Gemma. So their objective is really for people to adopt Gemma as a basis to create their own fine-tuned models, right? Speaking about limitation, they have this in the term of use. So don't do bad things with AI, because we discovered that AI is very powerful, so it's very frightening. So we have to frame, and you need some guardrails. So that's the rise of what we call responsible AI. So yes, don't do illegal activities, unlicensed practice of professions, defamation, misinformation, violence, whatever. Okay, so that's good. They define what is good, what is not. We all agree that these are bad uses of the model, but basically it contradicts the open source definition because you limit what you can do with the model, just to know, right? What are the other big players doing right now? They're trying to catch up, because now it's a gold rush. Everybody wants a piece of the cake. We're speaking about billions, trillions of dollars or euros. So whether they create their own models, and they can be kind of open, depending on the strategy of the player. And they also partner for the infrastructure, because in this vision of AI, it's very centralized. You need a lot of computing power to train the model and then to infer the model also, right? So you see here all the big players now, they're in the game. Microsoft invested a lot in OpenAI, all right? But they also create their own small, small language model, 5.3. Amazon is kind of a platform. They say they're agnostic, but they have a very strong partnership with Anthropic AI and to provide the cloud model. IBM is also working on his own model. Apple also, Oracle and Elon Musk are partnering also on infrastructure and how to run XAI and Grok model. And in China also Alibaba with the Qwen 2 open model running on his own infrastructure, right? So everybody is positioning in this game. There is one actor I didn't speak about, is Meta. Meta is a little bit different because first of all, it's not a cloud service provider. It's not selling resources. Yet, maybe, I don't know, but that's not the business right now. So they started also at the same time with Roberta. From the name, you can infer that it's based or it's inspired by BERT in implementing the transformer architecture. And everything was quite open. Only the data set, we have a few limitations, again, about responsible AI and limitation of what you can do with the data. But with the LLM hype, they also created their LLM version called LLaMA. And what they did at that time, they were kind of the first big player to do that. Maybe it was also a marketing move, I don't know. But they said, we allow people to reuse our model and then to fine tune, right? To derive, to specialize the model. And they called it open source, which you understand, for me, it's not correct because I don't have access to the data set and I don't have access to the data processing code, right? But they also added some terms of use to the license. And this one is interesting. With LLaMA 2 version, they say you can't build a system that has more than 700 million active users a month based on LLaMA without talking with us. So basically, if you start making a lot of money with it and you touch a lot of people, then you have to discuss with it because it won't be free anymore, right? And I was discussing with Jan, and he told me, yes, now we know what a GAFAM is. It's 1/10 of the global population. So if you touch 1/10 of the global population, you enter the GAFAM arena. So please come and talk with us because now we are really competitor, right? And then with version 3, they even reinforced that. They put some more restriction on how to reuse the model. Now they impose that you mentioned that your derived model, your fine-tuned model is based on Meta LLaMA 3, and even the name of your models should start by LLaMA 3 something, right? So again, they want to have the paternity of thing, and it's a way to become a big player in the arena that, as Jan said, is led now today by Microsoft and Google, right? So very interesting, those restrictions. So it's not only the license, it's also the term of use, all right? But what LLaMA did is the Meta did with LLaMA, they authorized people to reuse their model and to modify it. And that's what did two universities in the US, Stanford and a group of other universities. And they created the fine-tuned version based on LLaMA. They called Alpaca and Vicuna, who said that researchers don't have the sense of humor, you know, with animals. But basically what they did, they reused the foundational model, so the upstream model. So they inherit the level of openness, to my eyes, from this model. So the level 3 for the model and the pre-training data set, we don't have that much information about. And then they use another data set to train and specialize the model. But the problem is what they did, they use data coming from ShareGPT. ShareGPT is a website where people share the prompts and the results from OpenAI, you know, to advance and to share information. And they use this website to create their data set to fine-tune the model. So remember the restriction from OpenAI, don't do commercial LLM that will compete with us. So basically they inherit two restrictions, the restriction from Meta, because they're based on their foundational model, and the restriction from the data set coming from OpenAI, right? The code is distributed under Apache license. Then, Because of that, our project also decided, okay, let's maybe create new foundational models that will allow the reuse of the model and the specialization of the model. So here you see, I just pick up a few of them. Most of them are in the research domain, but you have one that is French, the enterprise, Mistral AI. I'll make a focus on Mistral just after that because it's interesting, all right? But what you see here for the three first, Eliefer AI, Falcon from the Emirates, or Bloom in the US, in the EU, sorry, they're based on foundational models. So Eliefer AI created a version of GPT-J and gave access to all the code, everything, and you can reuse. And we can see that the others, basically, they are between 3 and 4. The difference between 3 and 4 will be, again, responsible AI and restriction about usages, all right? What they did, though, is work on the data set, and they wanted to give some transparency on the data they were using to train the model and allow maybe other people to reuse the data set. So sometimes you have limitations. Not surprisingly, the commercial French company know information about the data set, but still, they share the code and they allow people to modify having the weights, but not having all the information on the data, right? So you can see that sometimes you have fuzziness regarding the data set. I think it's in the Bloom project. There is this sentence: please refer to the specific license depending on the subset you use, because they did aggregate many different sources to build their own data set, and they say, we don't really bother to check every source. So depending on what you do, that's your problem. It's for you to deal with. So be careful about that kind of stuff, right? So sometimes it's not very clear, the data set situation. And regarding the code, sometimes you have an instruction, sometimes you have all the instruction, and it's very easy to reproduce all the data processing part, right? Regarding the responsible AI and the limitation that you can have, if I take the Falcon example, so the one from the Emirates, this one is interesting because it's under an Apache license. So everybody say, oh, it's open source, it's an Apache license. But even this license, they say themselves it's a modified. And if you should read carefully this license, because basically, if you're trying to do a host service with that, then you have to discuss with us. So it's not open source anymore, right? So be careful about those little modified version of open source license, because basically they're not open source anymore, right? Mistral, let's have a focus on Mistral because it's very good example to illustrate all the diversity and the, you know, I'm French, and the French cuisine is all about mixing ingredients, all about the sauce, the secret sauce. So you have different kind of mix. And as a French-based company, let's say, now the money is also American, but they do excel in that. So you have a different kind of mixture that they are able to do. So first, they mix different kind of models. They have foundational models, they have fine-tuned models. For instance, Stral, yes, is a specialist for math. They also implement mixture of experts, where you have a parallel version and specialized models, and then you have a dispatcher. Depending on the question you have, it will dispatch to the appropriate model, so that increase the global capacity of the system. They also created recently small language models with Mistral 3 and 8B. That's interesting. But what they do also is they mix the models, the business models, and the licenses. So they have so-called open source models. I just described that. So no information on the data set, but you can reuse, fine-tune, create your own version of an LLM. They have a SDK that is called Mistral Fine-Tune. So basically, they really want to help anybody to create this own version of a Mistral-based model. They have commercial version. So optimized, supported version of the models, small, large, and embeds. And they also innovated with the notion of sustainable openness. Basically, it's for a license for no production model, and that's the license of CodeStral, which is a LLM specialized for code, right? So what I see here is the pattern that I know from the open source is you have the rise of community versus enterprise version. all right, basically. So if you want support, if you want very, very efficient models, please contract with us. And if not, you have some other community-based version, or you can reuse and create your own models, right? If you look at the Mistral non-production license, basically what they say is if you do testing, personal work, evaluation purpose, but not for production, yes, you can reuse and fine-tune the model. If not, you have to talk with it. And they even add another restriction, which is don't do any hosted and managed services or hide the model or the fine-tuned model or the derived model behind the software layer, because it's forbidden. You have to talk with us. So you see, it's a company. It's just the same kind of move as a Meta, for instance, right? So that's why we also had other projects based on those foundational models who said, okay, now we are allowed to fine-tune, just like the 2 universities in the US did with LLaMA. So let's do that. So for instance here, based on the foundational models, Databricks, US company, decided to create its own fine-tuned version based on GPT-J. Bloom Chat was based on Bloom, and Mistral was used to fine-tune a model by Hugging Face called Zephyr. All right, so they're able to do that because it's allowed by the license. That's the original intent from the people who did distribute the models. All right, so that's why they inherit the levels of openness from the foundational models. Regarding the fine-tuning data set, it depends. Some researchers, for instance, if you take LLM 360 or Zephyr, they also used, again, output coming from OpenAI. So they inherit the restriction, initial restriction, don't do commercial competitors to our products, all right? But we can see also that some of them created new data set, new fine-tuned data set with allowing people to reuse and to have access and modify the data set. So that's the case with Databricks, who created a data set. You see that Bloomchat reused the data set from Dolly, and Lion, that is another organization in Germany, actually, producing a lot of open data set. So they mixed that to create their own version of the model. And sometimes you don't have any information about the reward model when it's reinforced by human, as I explained at the beginning. Most of the time, the code is available. All right. What is interesting is the 2 last columns, because those 2 projects are coming more from the research world. They are trying to aim as the most open models. So they said, let's create foundational models and then fine-tune on top of those models some specialized model, the more open possible. So LLaMA 360. From the name, you can infer that, yes, obviously, that's what they want to do. They reused data set coming from other projects like Red Pajama, the one from Falcon, Star Coders, to create and pre-train their own models. But as I said, they use also output from OpenAI for the fine-tuned data set. Right? And Olmo, which is coming from the Alan AI Institute, is completely free and modifier. You can modify it and distribute it very easily. And what they did, they also created licenses and put licenses on the dataset. So created brand new dataset and called Dolma for the pre-training and Tulu 2 for the fine-tuned dataset, and they really put some licenses. They really want to push forwards how open the models can be built in a collaborative way. If you look at the restriction that they put, the Alan Institute for AI, basically, again, it's a responsible AI. Don't do bad things with it. So again, it contradicts the open source definition, but still, here is kind of green, so anybody can reuse and work collaboratively in the open source way. So I'm not speaking about open source license anymore, but the open source way being on top of each other, all right? So that was a way. As I said, I think generative AI is having its Linux moment. So I put a focus on the licenses because that's the basis. That's what organizes the way people collaborate and reuse the work of each other, right? There are other aspects that I observe also when I compare Gen AI and open source, and basically the way internet we build collectively internet also, the way to democratize and decentralize things and innovation. The first one is the rise of collaborative tools and ecosystems. So basically, and that's the open source way of doing things, you have some tools, some platforms that emerge and that allow communities to auto-organize. So I just cited here, Archive is not limited to artificial intelligence, of course, but it's a very good platform to have access to research paper, for instance. Jupyter Notebooks, a tool that is very democratizing the way to interact with LLM and to share recipe between users and help people to reuse what you did and create their own version of their LLM, for instance. And Hugging Face is kind of the GitHub for generative AI, when you have a lot of models, of a lot of data sets, and even applications that are shared, right? And that's the open source way, a lot of dynamism, collective and collaborative work, building together things, right? The other aspect is the hardware optimization. We need access to hardware to train and infer these models. So you have two axes here. First, you need some specialized chip to be very efficient. So GPU or XPU, because it could be NPU, depending on who is creating the specialized chip. People like Intel are working very hard on AI chips that will be in our laptops very soon. So in a few years, every computer will be able to run some kind of model, all right? And the objective is to aim and to target that kind of computer, obviously. And there is also the quantization mechanism, which is a way to reduce maybe the precision of a model, but then allow it to run on a regular CPU. And LLaMA C++ is a good project. It's based on, there is LLaMA in the name, but basically it's a framework to run models with the quantization system on infrastructure like regular CPUs or even in a Docker container, for instance, and then start create applications. And there is some reflection about how to decentralize training of the models and the inference of the model. The next version of LLaMA C++, for instance, will implement distributed inference. So that is very interesting, right? And the last part is all the ecosystem, the generation of open source tools and framework around to help and facilitate the creation of new models or new versions of models with the emergence of new standards, whether they're de jure or de facto, like GGML is the standard to exchange models in the LLaMA C++ way. But you also have Onyx. You also have LangChain, that is a well-known framework that helps to create LLM-based application and to abstract the LLM or the LLMs you are discussing with and to implement some architectural pattern to create your own applications. And it's done in the open source way again, or in a Unix way, let's say, to do one thing well. I will focus on doing something very well, and with the emergence of standards, we will collectively be able to build architecture on top of that by mixing all those different bricks and components, right? And LangChain was started in Python because Python is the language that was adopted by data scientists. Now is being ported in other languages, and that's another trend and phenomenon that is very interesting to observe. You have a JavaScript version, you have a Java version now. So it's going behind Python, it's going outside or from the labs, right? So just key takeaway from the presentation. What we see is the spectrum is kind of wide between closed API and what we could dream of, like free API, free AI, like as in freedom, of where everything is free, all right? And in between, you have all the different positioning, and it depends on what kind of component you are looking at. It can be, for instance, open weights. So you have access to the weights, but you don't have access to the data that were able to produce those weights, right? Key things to remember: data set and upstream transitivity. There are other components that are involved in creating a model, so we have to check the data set and what the model, the foundational model is the basis for the fine-tuned model that you're trying to use or to create, all right? Check also the competitiveness clauses. You see that the commercial actor, they put some restriction because there's a positioning here. And also check the responsible AI restriction, because sometimes it's okay, do no harm, but it's also don't do anything in health domain, for instance. So if your company is about health and health services, you should check those limitations before starting adopting a model to build your solutions, right? And then we see that we're moving from open research, as I said, I'm going back to my general trend of the beginning, to competitive market. That's where we are right now, with a lot of billions, a lot of announcement, a lot of positioning from the big players, the GAFAM, millions of dollars, billions of dollars. And we're moving towards a competitive ecosystem. That's the open source way, where people build some bricks that other company, other actors will be able to reuse to create more value. Because openness fosters reuse and collaboration. That's the basic idea of the open source way. And collaboration brings commoditization and innovation. So as I said, for me, LLMs soon will become commodities. So as a conclusion, it's just like open source. As I said, AI loves open source. Open source is good for AI. I think there is a way here also to have more control and more innovation with AI, and don't leave everything in the hands of big players that will be closing everything more and more with the business potential that keep increasing. All right, thank you for your attention. Don't have that time for questions, but maybe one question, or after the talk we can have some discussion if you wish. Don't know if I have time. One question, maybe, if there is. No. All right. So comment and CV.